Welcome to a Share Life Academy workshop as part of the Share Life podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I'm here with Tariq Cayne, founder of Pitch Play Co., and Jim Karwish, founder of Untangled Narrative, and also Ivan Alfaro, the founder of Commonweal. So, Tariq and Jim and Ivan, all of you say hello.
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 Hello, greetings.
Tariq is going to be leading us through a workshop about communication and community, so I will let him take it from here.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So, as Jason mentioned, I am the co-founder and coaching director of a company called Pitch Play Co. The whole concept of Pitch Play is we are a career coaching services agency. I'm really passionate about making sure that people really are able to express themselves in the way that they would like to in their careers, mostly on the entrepreneurial side, but corporate side as well, team buildings. I absolutely love doing workshops, talking to people, developing people. So this is super exciting for me. I'll start with the story at first before I even talk about the communication game that we're going to play. But this is a picture here in Puerto Viejo of Costa Rica. I absolutely love this place. I spent about 9 days in Costa Rica traveling from beach to beach, Airbnb to Airbnb, and it was just a super exciting experience. But let me tell you a story about this particular day and this particular, what you're seeing is a throne. It's really just a log in the beach that I found while we were hanging out. But we made it the coconut throne. And we're hanging out on the beach. I'm having a good time. And there are locals walking by on the beach, and they're just asking people, you want anything to eat? You want anything to drink? And at some point, I finally engaged with one of the locals, and I said, hey, I would like something. I like a brownie. And he goes, oh, yeah, I got dessert. I said, no, I want a special brownie. I didn't think he would understand what I meant, but I'm like, listen, I'm on vacation. I want to enjoy my time on the beach in Costa Rica. He goes, yeah, I got a special brownie. Throws me a brownie. I'm hanging out with two local friends. My wife and I are hanging out with two local friends, so they're really our translator. So he gives me a brownie, and then I see him kind of hanging out in this area over here. Our stuff is like in this area right here, and now at this point, my wife and I are in the beach, along with Tiffany, who's one of the locals that we were hanging out with. And I see this guy hanging out over here, and I'm starting to get nervous. My antennas are kind of up. I don't know if I'm just like a product of my environment, but I'm typically not trusting of strangers just kind of hanging around after selling me a special brownie. Now I'm starting to get nervous, like, what is he doing like around us? So then about an hour later, I'm starting to think I got ripped off because I feel absolutely nothing. And then he walks over to us and he goes, you guys hungry? And I'm like, he's a businessman. Gets me high and then feeds me food. I get it. I understand the plan now. So, my wife's pregnant, so I'm like, well, absolutely, we're hungry. We were going to go to a restaurant anyway. What do you have? And he says, I have gazapinto, rice and beans, and maybe some type of chicken and plantains. So it was a great meal, but he only had one. So we gave it to my wife, and we asked for three more. And he asked one of our local friends, he says, hey, can I use your phone to call my mom? And now my antennas are back up. Like, wait, hold on. This guy, one, doesn't have a phone, and two, he has to use your phone to call somebody in this random area. Now I'm starting to get nervous again. So he makes a call. He says, I have three more. He walks away. So I'm asking Aaron, who's our local friend. I'm saying, hey, man, you're not nervous at all that guy just used your phone? Our car is like, in Costa Rica, you can just park on the beach kind of. So the car is like right here. It's not far. He has our car. He has your phone number. He knows where we're at. He just gave me a special brownie. So I'm really vulnerable. You're not nervous at all? And Aaron and Tiffany, they just look at me and they very confused. They're like, no, why do you feel nervous? And I'm like, yeah, what if, he's setting us up for something? Like, you never know. Like, what if we're putting ourselves in danger trusting this guy? And they just explained to me, they said, listen, man, if anything, we're the scammers. He just gave us food. He just gave us brownies. We haven't even paid yet. And he left his cooler of drinks and whatever else was in the cooler. He left it here with us. So he's obviously trusting us. We could scam him by walking away and not paying for the food. So then that just led into a deeper conversation about how I was really taught not to trust my community as much. He said something in our conversation and my heart just kind of dropped. I couldn't really understand it. He said, "We don't even have an army here in Costa Rica." I couldn't process that. I'm like, wait, you guys don't have an army. Guns are at a minimum. You talk to your community, your neighbors, you get high together on the beach and you feel safe. And they just looked at me, they're like, yeah. And I just asked him, I said, wait, your country had slaves too, right? He's like, yeah. And I said, they're free now? He said, yeah. And I said, they feel safe? He's like, yeah. Just like, man, what you're describing to me is not something I could like easily process. So I had to do a lot of thinking on why I felt like this place was paradise and why I was so challenged in the differences there and the differences here. And I could only summarize that with the concept of the communication game. I now realize that we value independence over community. This is a generalization. This is probably not true for all. America's a very, very, very large place. But I've traveled America extensively for probably the past 7 to 8 years. Been in almost every region, maybe not the middle part, the central part of America, but I've been all over. And I see that we don't necessarily have that trust or we're pretty guarded in terms of how we behave in the community. It's almost like you're taught to do it yourself, grow yourself, and worry about everyone else second. So I'm just doing a lot of thinking on this, and I realize why it's such a problem for me, because as a career coach or a coaching director, I value relationships. I value community, but I typically get the walls down in the business standpoint. In the personal life, that's when I notice that we are kind of just like guarded a little bit. So we're about to play the communication game. This game is to do to you what it did to me, and maybe you guys are not plagued with the same cultural beliefs that I'm plagued with, but this is just what I thought would be very, very good for this audience or anyone else in the Americas. The first round of this game is to challenge you personally, just your personal space. Let's think of, if we're thinking about a game, right, it has to get harder as it goes up. So your communication starts inside your house. It starts inside your home, how you communicate with yourself, your spouse, your brothers, your sisters, your children, whoever the case is, whoever lives with you, or if you live by yourself, how you talk to yourself in the mirror, obviously. So round one, we'll start it off simple. I'll explain, or I'll ask a question. I'll give a skill tree right after this, and then I'll tie it all in together. The first question, which should challenge you, is to make you think is, do we spend enough time together as a family? Why or why not? And I expect we'll get a lot of, if we were taking a giant poll, you would get a lot of yeses and a lot of nos. And there's no wrong answer, as we'll see. But since we're recording this, I'll just open it up to the audience that we have. Anyone wants to take a crack at, do we spend enough time together as a family? Why or why not?
I guess my family would be my wife and I, so two people. And do we spend enough time together? I would say in general, yes, but it could be more for sure. Recently, I started to actually bring her in to help me with accounting for the business. So that's been good. Is that kind of an answer you were expecting, or should I go into more detail?
No, that's perfect. Let me just, before anyone else speaks, let me just go into that. So the first thought is typically the correct answer. That's how I typically like to say it, because it's first on your heart is, yeah, we do. We could spend more, but we do. Which is good, because some people would say instantly, no, we don't. All right. So you obviously have a meter to gauge on here, obviously thinking about improvement. But you mentioned something that I noticed just as a career coach that most people are hesitant to do. And that's bring our spouse into our business relationships or our business life, our business side. If you spend a lot of your time in business, which a lot of us do, and you're bringing your spouse into that, then you're welcoming your spouse into a majority portion of your life, which is a fantastic thing. Right? That's how I see it. That's a good start in trying to develop the relationship more. There are some families and they never enter the Venn diagram of work and family never intersect. So sometimes you will go your whole life and you feel like you don't even know the person. You don't see a side of the person that you're living with that other people see, and then that typically halts the progression of open communication. So I think that's a great answer to explore.
Yeah, it's kind of like that show Severance.
I haven't seen it, but I'll add it to my list. I'll
Yeah.
add it to my list.
And the basic premise being, I haven't seen it either, but the basic premise being that these people have separated these parts of their lives.
Okay, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah. So do we spend enough time together as a family? So I have a wife and 5 kids, so there's 7 of us. And I think it's kind of a combination of yes and no. Like in some ways yes, in some ways no. And then I think also beyond that, like there's also my parents and my sisters and their families, and my aunts and uncles and cousins. So that family, growing up, I had a lot of time together with family, extended family and grandparents and cousins and aunts. So I grew up with a lot of that, and it's a little bit different now for me and both my kids because we're in we moved away from where we lived, and so extended family is scattered around. So we have kind of this tight knit community. So yeah, I think in some ways, in a yes sense, one of the things that I've done that I know that the kids are going to grow up fast, and so I sort of set this sort of cadence. And every Monday, I take one of my kids on a one-on-one dinner, and we'll go see some. I have a second cousin who's in a living facility, and so we go visit him, and so it's kind of we're doing that, and that's great, and I love that. But on a day-to-day basis, I would say, we do spend enough time? Probably, no, the answer would be no. Like we don't spend enough time. So sometimes, how do I figure out ways to sort of create a ritual? And so I put 3 of my boys into flag football, and so that gives us this thing that we do on Sunday. Now we're spending more time. This past weekend, I took my daughter to a survival driving course in North Carolina, so that was time for us to spend together. So trying to do those things, but I think realizing that if I fast forward 20, 30 years and I look back, I'm probably going to regret that I didn't spend as much time as I could have.
So interesting. So yes and no was your answers, and if I think of it, my answer would probably also be yes and no. But you sound very similar to Ivan in terms of, okay, how can I integrate my family into my day to day? Ivan's was business. It sounds like you're like, okay, let's create a flag football day. Let's schedule a day where we're going to get together and do things. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's possible, even with your spouse, to spend 24/7 or what we consider enough time. But I noticed that in the time that you have with people, if you can be intentional about that time, then you'll learn about the other parts of their days that you don't get to see. It's almost, I think that's almost what makes time with family or very great, is because I get to now learn more about you. Even though I see you often because I do live with you, I know I'm not going to know everything about you. So if I spend time with you and actually make it very intentional about learning about what it is that you do when I don't see you, I'm actually gaining, if we're talking about stats in a game, right? Your relationship goes up with that person. You get a +3 relationship bonus just from learning more, or +2, or if you're spending time and it doesn't go well, sometimes -1 or -2. But this is a real good question to just kind of see, is there something else that I can be doing in my day? And I don't think any person ever feels like it's truly enough. Any person in my circle that ever feels like it's truly enough, but just the fact that you're being intentional about, let me add some more time together in my day with my family, is very good. I have other questions, so I'm gonna just move on for now, and bring up the skill tree. Just something that, as I was learning sitting there on the beach, well, one thing I was really appreciative of is the audience that we had. Like I said, it's me and my wife and our two local friends, Edon and Tiffany. And one thing that I've noticed that really grew those bonds together was our personal communication skills. Number one is active listening. I feel like I do a moderately good job at this, and my wife would tell you the exact opposite. She would tell you I'm not the best listener. And Tiffany said the same thing about Aaron, so I was just telling them, I was like, maybe it's a guy thing, maybe it's us, Aaron. But I noticed that as I was just listening to their stories, I was so engaged into every detail. I didn't doubt what they said. I just took it at face value. I just wanted to really, really listen and then tell them exactly what I heard back to them. So you're saying, okay, in Costa Rica, you guys have community because you have less opportunity. So you work together more often than relying on a paycheck or relying on a company or relying on business. You guys focus on community. I was like very, very intentional about listening to everything that they said without challenging their way of life, simply because I don't know. I have to put myself in their shoes.
Yeah.
The second skill that we have is just the ability to ask open-ended questions. If you're in the debate team and you want to ask a question and you just want the answer to be yes or no, then or I guess not debate team. I guess if you're a lawyer, you want it to be yes or no, whatever the case is where it's benefiting for you to just get a simple yes or no question. Great. I don't think that works when you're trying to build a relationship with someone. I think asking open-ended questions about like, hey, Ivan, do you spend enough time with your family? Why or why not? That actually helps me or positions me to be in a spot where I can actually be a better active listener. That actually helps someone else ask other questions about how something makes someone feel or what you can do. You're starting to kind of engage and build relationships and build trust. Like I was mentioning in Costa Rica, how I'm not trying to challenge them. There were a lot of things that they said that just instantly I kind of went in debate mode, and it was just like instinct, like natural. Like they said something, and back home, if they said this, then I would have want to challenge it. I would have want to say something because that's not how we do things, or which will come up later. So managing emotions is a tough skill. One workshop, Jim mentioned something that I just absolutely love, and I take with me a lot, which is don't if you don't know something, be curious about it versus being upset about it. Wow, why did that make me feel that way, or why did they say that? Like basically pause before reacting. Expressing feelings without blame is super beneficial. You guys know you're married. Super beneficial when you're trying to have a conversation with your wife. Like, this is how I feel. Not saying it's on you, baby, but this is how I took it. Just helping manage emotions is actually a skill that we have to use in our day-to-day, and is best used at the house. If you can do active listening, asking open-ended questions, managing your emotions inside of your house, this will help you as you start to go out and expand later into the communication game. And all three of those things are slowly starting to open up the doors for you to build trust with people.
Yeah.
When someone is vulnerable with you, like, hey, this is what happened. I told you guys I had a brownie on Costa Rica. I don't necessarily like the fact that I tell other people that I get high. It's not something that I'm excited about sharing. I wouldn't want my daughter to hear it, but if I'm being honest and open with you, I'm letting down my walls just to let you know that this is how I felt in the moment, why I felt it, and this is how you start to build trust with the other people, being vulnerable by sharing personal experiences. Or what I absolutely love doing is letting people know when I don't know something. Early in my relationship with my wife, I always wanted to be right. It didn't take long for me to realize that I would never be right with her. So that makes life easy for me. It's like, hey, baby, I don't know. That makes life easy. But saying I don't know to your lady is good, but also admitting when you don't know to someone else is even better, because you're showing like, hey, listen, you might be the expert in this area. I'm not 100% sure. I don't necessarily agree, but I'll take your word at face value for now. You're starting to build trust with people just because you're starting to build a better relationship with your personal communication skills.
Hey, Tariq, could I add something also regarding that?
Of course.
Regarding managing emotions section, one thing I noticed after years of working on myself is that um, I'm much more aware of, let's say, a scary movie. I'm much more prone to even jumping now because I'm more in touch with my emotional states or things that just make my body want to repel whatever I'm watching, and that sort of thing never happened 5 7 years ago because I was just so I had such a wall for my emotions. So I just wanted to add that there.
No, that's it's great because it's almost like I don't know if this was the case for you, but I didn't start feeling comfortable being vulnerable until I got married. Until I had to spend, especially in COVID, until I had to spend every day with someone and take the mask off completely. Like when you are able to commit with somebody and grow your relationship with a single person, it actually starts showing you how to get better relationships with other people. And since it's not that much of a commitment with other people, it's like I can put on a mask for 5 minutes and deal with you. It's okay. Like I got somebody at the house. I have to be very very honest. So if I disagree for now, or if I'm upset now, I can for 5 minutes just pause for a bit and then go home and tell my wife like, man, this this really pissed me off or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I noticed, and I probably should have added that here, but building a relationship with one person really, really well actually helps you manage how you deal with relationships if you use the experience correctly with other people. So these are at-home challenge. These are just 5 questions that just take with you. This is not something for us to do right now, but this should help you challenge your cultural beliefs if you're plagued with the same ones that I am or was. But what does success mean to you? And do you think, this is for the house, our family defines it in a healthy way? Or how do you feel when you ask for help? This is a major one. Why do you think that is? This is definitely a major one. This is not my home, but the house growing up, I noticed that we were very, very reluctant to ask for help from each other, which made us even more reluctant to ask for help outside of the house. So how do you feel when you ask for help, and why do you think that is? Third, do you think we spend enough time together, which was how we started off the round? If not, why do you think that happens? So, the answers might be interesting. At first you might think work. Something else might come up. Like honestly, after work, I need like 2 hours to recharge my battery, and unfortunately, those are the 2 hours that you're free. So that's just why we don't spend enough time. You just never know what comes up, but just giving the opportunity to the house would actually come up with a lot of different areas and probably blind sides that you've never seen before that will help you challenge those things. And then what unspoken rules exist in our family that might be holding us back from being closer? I should have wrote like hard mode next to that one.
Yeah.
And fifth and finally for the at home challenge is what are some things we prioritize that might not actually be bringing us happiness? My wife and I have been talking about moving to Costa Rica for quite some time. And when I say that, I mean, I've been bringing it up for quite some years. I don't know. And then we actually went and we saw why I wanted to do that and why I loved it and what I thought we could have. And then we thought about our home here, and then we just really started to brainstorm and say, the grass looks greener somewhere else, but maybe we're not doing everything that we can do to make sure that the grass is green here too, or we appreciate this grass here. So this is your at-home challenge. A lot of things that can be taken away from these 5 questions and will be discovered inside the house, and you'll just grow better in your relationships. At least that's the goal. And once you're in your house, and once you get better in your house, then you have to branch out. You have to go outside. That's one thing I noticed. In Costa Rica, I went outside every day. At home, I have my relationships here, but as soon as I'm done working, I just pull out my phone and I see what's happening in the world on my phone instead of actually going outside into my community and figuring out what else I can do to get involved a little bit more. So that brings us to round two. Round two, even though round one sounds challenging, especially the at-home challenge, round two is a little bit more challenging because it's not our immediate family. How well do we really know our neighbors? Man, so much just came to mind as soon as I said that. But how well do we really know our neighbors? I'll open it up to the floor. How well do we really know our neighbors? This was I think I know the answers were I know their names and I communicate with them regularly. I don't know them at all, or somewhere in the middle.
Jim, you want to start us off?
I feel personally attacked by this question. If I could have spoken when we were talking about home, I feel like I would have done so well, so well. So I've got neighbors that have it feels like there's an energy field around the perimeter of their house, and I'm one to know everybody. So I have tried to get to know one of my neighbors, but the others, even though they have kind of an outward energy that seems friendly enough, it doesn't seem like they actively want to be connected to. But that also might be because we moved into this house during COVID when everybody was really, really hyper aware of each other. So they were already neighbors. And then we moved in during COVID, and it was a while before we really felt like we could get near each other. So right now, I would say I don't feel like I know my neighbors at all. I've got the gentleman that lives right next to me, whose name is Bill. I feel very good about very intentionally going and meeting him, sitting down with him, talking. He's 101, and he still gets out and does yard work. So really fascinating guy. But after that initial couple of times that we hung out together, something again happened, and there was some sort of a feeling of just, this is not, so I haven't actively broken through it. And part of the reason I think I haven't actively broken through to try and figure out what that energy is that we do such a good job of being in communication and family that if you feel uncomfortable out there, you just run back inside again and you're comfy back in your hidey hole again. So if I could have answered question one, I think I'm like a B plus, but on this I think I've like an F minus on.
No, I think this is actually an A plus answer. I think what you're speaking to is how a lot of us feel and what a lot of us gone through, especially after the pandemic. Before I continue to open it up, it's funny what you said. If we're thinking about a game, typically when you're playing and you start off in the easier part of the game. So when it gets a little bit harder, it's okay. I'll just go back to my home base, restock, rest, get my health back up, and then go back outside. It's natural. I feel like we do it. So A plus answer. Jason, you're going to say something?
Yeah, well, I guess one question, I did want to ask you a question, Jim, because I think this gets to Tariq's point earlier about Americans being very individualistic. And my question to you is, like, what was it like growing up, and how did your parents interact with neighbors? And, when I just think about growing up, we kind of knew our neighbors to the left and the right, like, a little bit. But the people we spent time with were not our neighbors, in terms of dinners and meals and stuff. And so the neighbors that I did spend any amount of time with were probably either family or I had a friend their age that was like in a class. But I don't know, what was your experience like growing up in terms of neighborliness?
I'm an old person. I'm 50. I'll be turning 50 here in April. So I was growing up right before I felt like there was kind of a shift in how people relate to one another. We didn't have the things you can fall back into. So the things that like when I was growing up, there wasn't an internet. There wasn't you didn't have devices that you held in your hand or anything. And I'm not one of the older people that think, that devices are inherently bad, and kids who use iPads are bad. Like that's not me at all. But I did notice that around the time of my growing up, from middle school and into the beginning of high school, we went out, we found our friends, and we played. We played together. We talked a lot. We shared things. We fought. We made up. We did all sorts of things together. Even though we weren't necessarily, we didn't really necessarily fit personality-wise, all of us. We were friends because of proximity.
Yeah.
And that was something, if somebody came to your door and knocked on it or rang the doorbell, it wasn't, there wasn't a negative response to it. It was, oh, who's here?
Oh my God, who is that?
Who's here? Now, if somebody rings your doorbell, you're like, what? Why? I don't have a delivery. Why is somebody knocking on my door?
What are you doing
ringing, right? Or you're using your Ring doorbell to talk to them through your phone out, and they're in your yard, and you're going, what are you doing here? We don't want you here. So for me growing up, it was really easy for me. When I was 9 years old, my mom she tells me this story, I don't remember, but she says I knew every single family in the neighborhood. I went from house to house. I found out if they had kids. If they did, I would figure out if they could play. If they didn't, I would ask them what kinds of things they liked to do or talk about or whatever, and then I would go and visit them. And so that was a big part of who I was. And when I went away to college and then came back from college again to my hometown, things had changed a lot. Things had really started to shift.
Jim, could you just stop waving your cane at the kids in the neighborhood now and saying, get off the street, you hoodlums?
Yeah, I actually had to have the street and my porch removed because the kids kept getting on it.
My neighbors, I know one of them kind of a little bit about them, their career. The other is not so much. I will say, however, in terms of experience, at 2 houses ago, I actually had to set out a restraining order against my neighbor when I was in downtown.
Wow.
A crazy experience that established some new boundaries around how close I want to get to neighbors going home. So just give and take to that. But he got too comfortable and was doing things that was just inappropriate, like walking into the backside of my yard without my permission, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you're like, I know my neighbors too well. I gotta keep them away. But I think that's, I recently joined my homeowners association board, and just finally had some conversations. I'm learning a lot about my neighbors in the neighborhood just in general. And I think being on the board of an HOA is tough simply because obviously the biggest pain point is the dues or the fees that HOAs bring. And I tried to voice from the neighbor's perspective, like, hey, the dues are getting kind of crazy or there's not enough communication. And just hearing how, I guess just hearing the feedback internally versus being an external part, I start to realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, way more than just like lowering the dues or being more courteous about the fees. We don't know each other. I look at data and I see which neighbors are delinquent and which neighbors are always paying, and to me it's just data. It's just numbers. I don't know this person. I just see the address, I see the name, but I have no idea who they are, what they look like, their situation. And I noticed that a few of my board members barely know our neighbors either. So I wanted to add this because I know for a fact that there is more that can be done and needs to be done. And to do that, before we get into the challenge, we have to use our skill tree. Conflict resolution. Now, we're going to exclude Ivan's story for now, because maybe the common ground was the law. But focusing on solutions and not blame is something that my board desperately needed, and I'm so happy to try to contribute to that. It's always this person's fault, that person's fault, or this situation, that situation, and you guys are the reason my bills are due, whatever the case is. There's not enough conversation on the solution. One reason I really like this workshop, this group that you guys started, Jason, is simply because a lot of it is like, hey, here's the problem, and here's how we can combat the problem. Here is how we start looking at solutions. Whenever I was managing a team in tech, I hated when my team came to me and they called out a problem and they never started on working out the solution. That bothered me so much. Focusing on the solution with someone gets people involved. They're starting to brainstorm together. A lot of people do shoot down ideas quickly. And I know some people that do that, but at least when they start to voice how they feel and start to express how they feel, and then eventually we get to focusing on a solution, people start to become a part of the solution and care less about the problem, because they're now saying that problem is going to go away if we can focus on making this solution a reality. Now I don't have to blame this person or that person for the problem, because in my solution, I'm going to make sure we mitigate any reasons or any causes that causes the conflict to happen or the problem to happen. This is not a skill that a lot of people focus on or have, obviously, but that's okay, because we're focusing on beating the game and beating the communication game. We're at the midway point. So now when we start to develop the conflict resolution skill, we'll start to see that it's way easier to find common ground. Obviously, if someone that you're communicating with is not at that level yet and is not prepared to find common ground, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But one thing that you'll start to gain just for you doing this is a more empathetic approach to your communication, which is our second skill.
Yeah.
Interpersonal and small group communication skill tree.
Cool.
I always like to see how I would feel in someone else's shoes. This was not easy for me to get to, and I'll say easier today, but I like to go to the most extreme scenario that I can go to. Let's just say, all right, we're in America, it's 2025. Right now, it's like, if I was president of the United States, how would I do things differently? And then I have to start thinking, it's like, man, first off, that's a lot of pressure. The entire world, it's literally looking at you, everything that you do. I start to evaluate, like, okay, maybe it's easier to judge than actually act. Or we can go from a much smaller example. Let's say a janitor. Like, oh man, I would have this place super clean if I was that janitor. And I really don't know what that person goes through on a day-to-day basis, or the tenants that they're cleaning up after, or kids that they're cleaning up after. You just like never really know. I always try to figure out how would I feel in their shoes, and that makes it easier speaking with them. My mother always told me, treat the CEO the same way you would treat the janitor. This skill set was easier for me to kind of adapt because of that saying. I am typically most aggressive and defensive when I see people in power pick on the little guy. I hate that. I really can't stand it, because that person was the little guy at some point. And just because you're on top today doesn't mean you'll be on top tomorrow. We need each other. And that's something that the empathy and perspective taking skill is going to really help you start to just like, okay, how would I feel if I was in their shoes? Especially in a community, especially in your neighborhood. I don't know how you can put yourself in the shoes of someone that walks in your backyard without permission. So maybe it doesn't work for everyone. But it's still a good skill to try. Not all skills are applicable for every scenario. But this helped me challenge ideas more respectfully. Sometimes I don't always challenge ideas. Some people aren't worth voicing. Some people aren't worth the challenge because it might not go anywhere. So it's always good to go back to your first skill tree and just be an active listener. But if you're trying to just grow a little bit more, challenging ideas respectfully is a real skill that's going to help tremendously in any aspect in life. I keep bringing up my wife because obviously she's the boss. So, if I apply these skills to the boss, and they must work. But one thing I think that we do very well is, or are doing much better at, is I understand what you're saying, and that makes sense. Here's how I see it. When I was in Costa Rica, talking to the locals, everything they said, because I'm new, I'm like, I get it. But this is why I think the way that I do.
Yeah.
And that made it very easy for us to just create a bridge from one perspective to the other and kind of meet in the middle and to see what can they take away from me and what I can take away from them. Just challenging their ideas is important. I say it respectfully because you want to build a relationship, but just challenging the idea in general is so important. This will be in the next skill tree, but I'll just allude to it right now because you never want the "this is how we've always done it" mentality, because then that halts growth and it halts other. It's kind of like isolates other people that have ideas that want to try something new from voicing it or feeling involved because you're dismissing them by saying, "Oh, we've always done it this way. That's how we'll always do it." And you stop yourself from getting better. You stop other people from getting better. Challenging ideas respectfully is so important. That's how we continue to grow. And then what those three do, like the last one, it encourages honest conversation. This is a skill that builds off the other skills, but you are creating safe spaces for dialogue. Jim, Jason, you guys have done that here in this workshop. The first time I joined felt the same as today, and every time in between felt the same as today. A safe space for dialogue. Agree, disagree. We challenge ideas respectfully. It's very empathetic. There's conflict resolution in terms of the perspective that we're bringing to the table. Maybe not something to act on immediately, but this skill tree is the next level of the communication game. Which, before I go into the challenge, because we had a question last time, is there any question or thoughts on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers here with the four steps, but I do think, kind of the third one here, challenging ideas respectfully. I see it differently because I think kind of actually goes well with number 3 and the last one, which was emotional resilient or emotional control. Mm-hmm. When you give me feedback, it can help me be better. But if my pride is in control, then I want to be defensive, right? Which means I'm good as I am and I don't need to grow, right? So I have to, and as a Christian, I think that's sort of the idea of like dying to self, is I have to sort of let myself die, a little bit of me, to receive that input, to go, yeah, I am failing here. I have dropped the ball. I'm not doing good enough. I can improve. I can be better because I'm moving towards something, towards that vision, towards something, towards that solution, away from the problem, towards something better. And as much as it might feel difficult or feel unpleasant, the idea of getting that feedback. And then I think when we give feedback to other people, if we can do it in a way that they're most likely to receive it in, I think that's our responsibility. Like sometimes that may not always be possible, and sometimes we might have to be very candid and direct. But I think ultimately we should want to deliver the information in the way that they'll most likely receive it, and if we want them to actually receive it, versus us just sort of venting or saying something. So that's an interesting layer, and I think that ties into the safe places in terms of some people just maybe they've never experienced that or they don't know how to do that. And so if we can facilitate those types of environments and settings and conversations, it allows us to practice it. It allows them to experience it if they haven't, and particularly for those that have never had that type of thing. So those are a few thoughts.
Yeah, my thought actually kind of connects to that, and that feedback could also be a matter of pace feedback. Like instead of one gigantic loaf of bread piece of feedback in one specific amount of time, maybe make it breadcrumbs along the way, which is kind of like how, and thinking about that situation with my neighbor could have probably been more helpful, because I would give him, when I was home, I would sometimes let him see the construction projects that were going on. So he would come and see some of the stuff in the backyard or in the front. And so I probably kind of opened the door a little bit to that last situation that unnerved me, and I got really abrasive with my cutting language about like, hey, even if you're coming over here to cover some concrete or materials, it's not acceptable for you to just be doing that. even if it's just outside the fence. This is like where I park my car. This is a private area. And so he took that very personally versus the little things he did that were kind of strange along the way over the years. If I just gave him little breadcrumb pieces of feedback, it probably could have mitigated that scenario where it just kind of went downhill very fast.
Funny, Ivan, it's kind of like if you don't start to challenge things, it's like a dam that fills up. And it just like gets stronger and stronger, and then next thing you know, they do something, and then the dam just breaks, and you're like, "Oh, you yard walking in mother!" And it's just like you just get really, really upset and just gushes out. That's why, Jason, to your point, this is similar to number one, the first skill tree, but it's to me the next level because the first skill tree is something that we kind of are forced to do in our home. This one is kind of alluding to if you can do it outside your house, it's even better. But it is more difficult because you can't always control. That's why I like the breadcrumb analogy, Ivan. I might steal that one because you can't necessarily control outside. This part of the game is just a little bit more difficult. Sorry, Jim.
Oh, Jim, no. What do you want to add?
Yeah, no, mine was just. I personally am very, very welcoming, and I, as a younger person, would just erase all my boundaries, and I would just be like, "Come on, let's get on in here." And then when someone would be determined as not really trustworthy, they're already like, we're practically hugging. Like they've moved through all of it because I just erased all the boundaries, welcomed them close, and then something would happen. So I had to learn through my life to have boundaries. And some of the most healthy people that I know seem, in my opinion, it's changing over time as I get older, but in my opinion, I would call them a little bit too cautious. In order to get trust built, I would say take a little bit more risk. But if you watch how someone handles, let's say, like 3 or 4 rings out from the center of the trunk of the tree, right? Like you're holding them out here until they show you that they can move a little closer and you can trust them, and you move a little closer and you can trust them. And so the people that I say, take a little bit more risk, go ahead and let them a little bit closer so that you can get to know them better. I've seen some evidence of where they had the right, they made the right call by being gradual about, letting somebody in. And so my eyes were open. I was a little bit, I don't know. I'm trying to be self-deprecating here because I feel like I had a lot that I had to learn. But I got blindsided by someone who I let close be hurtful, and I didn't really want to stop letting people close, so I had to calibrate boundaries and how they would work and what's reasonable. And many times I have benefited from that in life now, but I also feel an impatience. I'm like, I get this person. I get their energy. I get their mind. I get how they relate to other people. They're so this, they're so that. But if you let them too close too fast, just like Ivan was talking about earlier on, he let somebody in close and fast, and that person stayed that close. And it was like, no, you're now when you were behaving in such a way that I haven't given you permission for that, right? Like, we still have to have boundaries here. The norms weren't created. The boundaries weren't really clear. And so I'm not saying it's Ivan's fault or anything like that. The other person still should have realized you don't just walk into somebody's backyard without them knowing or without permission. But it can get fuzzy and muddy, and you can. So I think it's easy to stay super private and individualistic, and it's also easy to just be wide open and get hurt a lot. I think the hard part, like in anything in life, is a balance between holding boundaries, allowing people to move closer as they gain trust, so that it is like it's an honor to be asked into someone's home because you have built up enough trust to be brought in, and that so.
Yeah, and really the person he was talking about was me, because he had to move away from Atlanta just to create more layers of separation between me and Jim. Jim just needed more gates and walls to block me out.
Yeah, And
And
still,
this
he'll drive hours to get out here to me. He'll just be on my couch watching TV and eating my popcorn. And I'm like, what are you doing here?
But no, I actually, to being joking and having fun, actually is an example of safety. Like when we can joke with each other about things, that's a sign that we, assuming we're not using it as like a way to like cut each other into pieces, but humor is a sign that there's enough safety in the relationship to make jokes like that.
Right.
As you encourage honest conversations and then in the first skill tree build trust, certain jokes that are super offensive become funny, haha. Because it's like, oh, okay, I know this guy, I know this girl.
Yeah.
Just joking around. When they don't have that trust, it's like, whoa, like relax.
Yeah.
Like comedians have had a hard time in our country since COVID, and I think because we kind of moved away from community and just straight into digital, so you don't even know what you're absorbing when you're scrolling or when you see someone make a joke. You don't know the person. The access is just so in your face that it's like you have no idea who you're interacting with, what they're saying, or if they truly mean what they're saying. That's why most people struggle to get to this part of the game, going outside their house and building the community and building relationships. But I personally like meeting someone before following them on social or whatever the case. If I like knowing you in real life before I add you into my digital footprint. I'll say it like that. This challenge, a little bit more difficult than the last. I mean, the last was tough, but this one is probably a little bit more difficult because this is the neighborhood challenge. How well do we really know our neighbors? We kind of spoke about this already. And why do you think we keep our distance? This is a little bit more introspective. The answer that typically comes up, and the first thing is why we react the way that we do, or why we respond the way that we do. This is meant to really make you think, do I really have a strong reason for keeping my distance from everyone, not waving when I see my neighbor, or not speaking, or whatever the case is. This is the challenge us a little bit more. And being on the homeowners association forced me to realize, like, I keep my distance for absolutely no real reason whatsoever besides I don't want to talk when I come home. I just want to go straight to my garage. What would happen if we relied more on each other instead of just paying for services? Business is something that I really, really love. I made a business about business. And one thing I will say is, as I study it more, the most strongest part of trade is not service for money or product for money. It's actually resource for resource. If we relied more on each other instead of just paying for services, it would actually build stronger relationships. This is not a professional opinion. This is a personal thought. But it would actually build stronger relationships because I know what you bring to the table. This is what I can do to bring to the table. And this is how we can help each other out. No need to exchange money for this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It actually, well, and I can, I can give a specific example of that. I think technology has a way of doing the opposite of what you're describing. And I'll even just use simply like having two cars in a family. So we have, since COVID, we have one car. And that makes it so that certain situations are more difficult. But there was a situation where, several months ago where we needed essentially a second car, but we didn't have it. So I had to ask a neighbor to take me, right? And so here's this opportunity where, one, I have to ask for help. Two, the neighbor, I'm spending time with the neighbor. And so, and he asks, me for help. So all of a sudden there's a communal dynamic that's a natural thing that facilitates the development and growth. But by having two cars, that is gone because now I no longer need to ask him. And I can just do it on my own. And that goes back to that individualism. And so I think a lot of the technology and wealth and resources that we do have can limit community. And one of the things that we did in our business when I had my marketing company is we kind of identified that this was the dynamic. And so we actually intentionally created what we called community time. So when we would meet with the client, we would say, hey, we would like to meet with you for 30 minutes before our meeting to have community time with you, or 30 minutes after the meeting, where the meeting is strictly focused on getting this stuff done. And that actually helped the meetings become more productive, because a lot of times the community gets just sort of intertwined, and if you actually call it out and focus on it and prioritize it, then you can make it happen. And we did that inside the company as well. We would have an intentional community time amongst the team that wasn't strictly about performance. So those are a few things that come to mind. Yeah.
I like that. I feel like I do that naturally, and sometimes
Yeah.
it bothers people because they're just like, weren't we going to talk about something? But then they kind of realize I'm just alluding. I'm leading us in. I'm leading us there. We don't have to go straight business. Let's build a relationship.
Yeah.
How does our neighborhood reinforce ideas of independence versus interdependence? I don't know how easy this is to do outside of an HOA, because I never even thought about it until I joined my own. But I know we don't reinforce the ideas of interdependence until it's time to complain about the fees and the dues. Then we come together instantly. But outside of that, 2 out of the 12 months, we're not really together. Do we create spaces for real conversations, or do we avoid deep discussions out of politeness? And then lastly, all of these could be probably listed as hard mode questions, but lastly, what could we do to make this neighborhood feel more like a community? Number 5 is the toughest one to me, because it requires service from us. That is not something like, what can I do? It's not something you can do in your house, because we're at the neighborhood challenge. We're at round 2 of the communication game. This is something you have to actively go outside and do. Even if you go to your, I was at my city council meeting not too long ago, and I got to just see my community, to see what they talk about, see what bothers them, see what's on our agenda. Actually go outside and figure out, what's going on in my city, what's going on in my community, which leads into the hardest round that we have. Round 3. We spoke about in our house. We branched out a little bit, spoke about our neighborhood. Now, the reason this is the final round is because I wrote this down. I don't have I do have the book. I wrote this down, and I'll tell you a passage, but I truly believe this to be the case. But I believe if I want to create an environment like I experienced in Puerto Viejo, then I believe that you have to do this with 2 very specific conditions. We already spoke about one, which is community commitment, someone committing or people committing to be more interdependent. The second one is small towns or small environments. I truly believe that when it becomes too large of an environment or a community, then it makes it very difficult to feel connected. Especially considering in Smyrna, you can go 5 minutes one way and it's a completely different neighborhood. You go 5 minutes the opposite way and it's very, very, very vastly different. So I feel like if it becomes too large, it becomes harder to get a community to commit to a certain level of relationship with each other. So this round is more of, think of a small town. I mean, Smyrna's not super small, but it's definitely not as big as Atlanta. So to me, it's a little bit easier to kind of manage this. But think of a small town, a small city. I'm not going to give any numbers of a population. I'm sure we all have our own concepts of small. But your community is facing a crisis. You already got the idea in your head what your community is, how big it is, how many people. How would you respond?
Violence.
No violence.
Again,
Peaceful.
This is recorded, so QR code for the people that will see this later. It's not going to take answers, but your community is facing the crisis. How would you respond after the violence? What do you do? No. I'll open this one up. Your community is facing a crisis. How would you respond? Sorry, the crisis is a lot of the things that we were discussing. Not together, or you can add stuff like homelessness, poor education for schools. I know there are some schools in Mableton. It's not Smyrna, but Mableton's not far, where they're really struggling in terms of resources for their kids. So your community is facing a crisis. How would you respond?
Ivan, you want to start?
He said violence. I think we got Ivan's.
What's your alternative to violence? We need an alternative that's not
You
violent.
know, I feel like personally attacking Jim. Jim, didn't you raise your hand a second ago?
Sure, Ivan. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. But if you've got nothing, man, we can. This will be edited later, so we'll just tell Jason to cut this part out. So I feel like the question is a big one, and I think the context of answering it would help when we say not just what size is our community, but based on how we perceive our community, how we feel about being a part of our community is going to dictate it. So I think the people so I'm in Rome, Georgia, and it's like a really big town or a really small city, right? And the way that people would respond here, it would likely be a church that would respond first, because they are the most in touch with each other. And there are some churches that are here that are really well networked, right? Whether or not they would agree with each other on what to do right away, it would probably have to be led by a leader of some sort. But if you were talking about your community is in crisis and you were somebody who, like me, I moved into this house when it was COVID, and I don't feel connected to the community as much. So I don't feel like a leader of this community. I don't feel in tune with the community as much. I like the place that I live, and I feel good about the city, but I would have trouble answering your question about what would I do.
I like that. I like that answer, only because that's why it's round 3. Like, basically... This is not something the average person should just wake up and feel like, oh, how can I help my community? That actually was what I was hoping that we would kind of come to together. Is this is something that we have to build up to. Like what I've been doing, like I'm mentioning, I'm going to my city council meetings. I heard 2 things. I'll be specific. This is public knowledge, so this shouldn't be a problem. One, I saw that Smyrna has a huge swimming population. Our swim team has families across the board, from every demographic, from every financial bucket, I'll just call it like that. Every person was so adamant about the facility that we use for swimming because so many kids rely on this activity outside of school. I got to see firsthand, like, oh, this is bringing our community together. This has nothing to do with the resources that we have. I saw people come together for one common goal, which was the swim team for the youth. Second, the next town hall meeting I saw that we were celebrating Campbell High School for our students that kept getting college scholarships. And I just started to notice that I was afraid to kind of speak up in my city halls, and others, not citizens, but, I guess citizens of the town, other townspeople were so confident just walking up saying, hey, Mayor, this is what I think. Hey, Mayor, this is that. I am now actively going a lot more to build up the confidence to say, hey, I would like to contribute to the city in X, Y, and Z. I'm still trying to figure out what that is. But I think that whole point is, as we start to build our relationships inside our home, get a little bit more expanded in building relationships inside our community, our neighborhood, it makes it easier for us to figure out and identify, how can I help my community? My community is facing a crisis. We don't necessarily, the average person doesn't necessarily know what that is. But the more you start going outside, the more you start getting involved, you kind of identify, like, I didn't even know that was a problem. I could easily help with this. This could be something like communication is a problem. Easily do this speech. The city has budget. That's another thing I'm learning about budget and your HOA and budget in your city and what they would actually put money towards helping you help them. The final skill tree. The first one is a skill that is so difficult to achieve. And I think it only is really developed through experience, not necessarily reading about it or anything like that. This is something that you actually have to do, is bridging social divides. When I'm at City Hall and I see our 7 council members and I see our town full of every single type of person all in one room trying to come to an understanding a little bit, I now realize that the mayor has a lot more respect for me than he initially had because I didn't know who he was. But there were so many different perspectives that he was engaging with and making sure that the entire town was heard, and still does that. I've yet to see any evidence that he avoids that. You know, when you are able to engage different perspectives or diverse perspectives all at once, or maybe on an individual level, that is a skill that really helps bridge social divide. I've noticed that just from being born, living in College Park, Georgia, and then going to school in Roswell. That experience helped me learn one community from another, and then traveling helped me bridge those gaps a little bit. So through experience, I've actually gotten better at bridging social divides. You cannot do this, and this is the biggest disclaimer, you cannot do this if you're only talking to people that look like you, speak like you, think like you. And I'm just, in terms of being one echo chamber, it makes it very hard to have a diverse perspective because you're just around the same environment that's only echoing how you think, how you feel, and how you look, and how you walk, how you talk, how you, whatever the case is, whatever you're comfortable with. If someone is only echoing that, then you can't really get a diverse perspective. This is something you have to experience just from talking. This is a great example of the experience that we're getting. I don't know where everyone comes from, but I'm assuming we all have diverse perspectives, and constantly we keep coming back and sharing those diverse perspectives. So bridging social divides is a skill that's going to help build your community. Second is facilitating group discussions. I mean, do I need to add a little bit more into, I mean, we do this often. I mean, this is phenomenal. But for the recording, this skill, as you can see, helps you guide other people without necessarily smothering them. So I'll say it like this. Let's say I play the communication game often and I'm level 50. And now I see someone playing and they're level 2. If I am telling a level 2 person and a level 30 or 50 person to kind of have a conversation, I should expect chaos. Facilitating group discussions help you kind of guide people without anyone dominating or without anyone feeling like helping bring everyone to the level where they're at. So for example, let's say Jason's level 50 and I'm level 10. If he was explaining stuff to me and I didn't really get it, Jim is probably good at saying, well, hey, here is probably what Jason meant. Tariq, is that your perspective? Facilitating group discussions help you guide other people without smothering them or making them feel less than.
Bridging the gap.
Bridging the gap, and it keeps that discussion productive. Just because I feel a certain type of way, having someone guide and lead those group discussions helps me bring me along the journey, and I can either address how I feel or let it go or whatever is needed in that conversation because someone is helping me guide me along the journey. And we can revisit at some point, but at least I'm not feeling left behind. That, which is a very, very good skill.
Yeah. And I think you use the word dominating, which I think is just a critical word, because we can dominate people and build a paradigm around dominating people, making them, forcing them, coercing them, forcing our way. But it's very consequential. It has a lot of consequences that we have to deal with, and it's very unhealthy and toxic. So being able to accomplish and move things and act and speak in a way that facilitates versus dominating, I think is a critical component, because I think when we get frustrated and angry and rageful, we want to dominate.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. And you imagine if someone is dominating and then they have the mentality that I mentioned earlier, that's this is the way things have always been mentality, then now I'm not labeling you. I'm like limiting you from ever even voicing a different opinion than my dominating thoughts. Challenging cultural norms is a very, very hard skill. One, you got to get through the mental block to actually challenge someone. And then two, you have to get through the physical discussion voicing yourself and having someone else challenge what you think. You should always question the way things have always been. Not necessarily to say that they're wrong, but just to make sure that you understand it. You know, I grew up in church often, and I would hear, these are the things that you have to do, and I would get in trouble, typically with my mom, because I'm always like, well, why? It's like, well, this is the way. Well, if I don't understand it, or if I don't question it, and I never come to an understanding, then I'm just doing that echo chamber. I'm not really getting their perspective and understanding their perspective to then share it with other people. Challenge the cultural norms just to make sure that you're okay with it, that you're comfortable with it. And you might even discover that is the right way the entire time, or you'll help other people discover, maybe we should look at this a different way. We had something similar like that. I've asked a question. The first time I asked it, it was kind of like, this is how we've done it, Tariq. And then the next meeting, it's like, hey, I really was thinking about what you said, and maybe we should look into what you brought up. The initial reaction when you challenge something initially is probably very difficult. I am always in the situation where I'm the asshole, and then a month later or 6 months later, it's like, Tariq, you know what I was thinking? Typically they bring it up in the, what I was thinking, like you're not the one that challenged it initially, but it's okay. As long as we get here, that's perfectly fine. Because now what you're doing is offering new perspectives. Everyone has their own journey, but just being the one to shed light on something actually helps people move in that direction. And like the other two skill trees, your final skill is kind of built upon the first three. You are eventually creating a culture of collaboration. People are now not hesitant, I guess, about voicing themselves because they now know this is how it's going to play out. It might be difficult, but I've seen us get through it. When you have the mentality that you survive 100% of your bad days, you're not necessarily concerned about the hardships anymore because you'll get through it, and then you'll come on the other side and you'll become better. And if you bring your community and your society along that, then that creates a culture of collaboration. You go from me to we. And this leads into the last challenge, but I'll obviously open up to the floor before we get to the last challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the collaboration and in participation, is such a, when you're dealing, like you mentioned, the larger group is very difficult. So the larger you get, it's hard for me to get myself collaborating with myself, let alone my family, let alone my community, my neighborhood, let alone my city. So this is very difficult, but I think your hierarchy of starting with small and building out is helpful, because as we practice and master it at a smaller level, then we can hopefully leverage those skills and experiences to the next layer and the next scale, and towards that cultural collaboration, where it's not a bunch of individuals fighting each other towards 100 different directions, but we're actually working together towards a common vision, towards a common solution. And then also having enough space between us that we don't murder each other in the process. So,
Well, that's Ivan's ideas.
So Ivan, do you agree or?
I agree. Basically, you're saying violence is always the answer, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Violence is never the answer. Almost never the answer.
I did also want to track this back even to the family dynamic too. I had to challenge my own Latino family upbringing because we had a lot of toxic masculinity. Even my grandma would say women are evil, you got to be careful with them. These weird dynamics that clearly their traumas were speaking out from. So I had to observe and be like, well, they're saying all these things, but their life is not exactly playing out or being conducive to that sort of thinking. So I'm glad I kind of deviated from that perspective and just was silent when they said things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because it always starts in our home. It always starts in our family. Especially growing up, it typically starts from parents and siblings. that you have to start to build these things. I always think of, I don't like saying life is a game, but if I had to compare life as an overall game, I always think of school, high school, as the final part of the tutorial. Like, you kind of go through the tutorial and you have to do all of these things with your family, your friends, your neighborhood, your community. You have to do all of these things, and then you graduate, or you pay for the DLC and you go to college, and then you get to extend the tutorial a little bit. But then you go out into the world, and then you realize you're back at skill tree 1. You're back at square one, where you have to now do it all over again in your own house. And from a whole different perspective with a lot more responsibility. Then you have to build these skills up again until maybe eventually you have children and then they're challenging you, whatever the case is. But this is a skill tree that is constantly being used. But unfortunately, a lot of us only stick with the first, and we are hesitant, at least here in America, to go outside and kind of see how can we bring the community together. The reason this is the final challenge is because it's so difficult. This is not something that I'm saying is just easy, or not something that I'm saying can be done overnight. This is years of playing the game, the communication game. This is also not something that we can do alone, which is the biggest thing that I want to mention. It takes a community, obviously, to build these skills. The final challenge, the community challenge. If you thought the first 2 challenges were difficult, obviously this won't surprise you. Who in our community is struggling the most, and what stops us from helping? Why do we tend to trust institutions more than our own neighbors? How often do we interact with people outside of our social and economic class? Circles, I guess, would be a more appropriate thing to say. And in what ways does consumerism shape our sense of belonging? We were kind of alluding to this before about trading services and products for money versus resource for resource. And lastly, what would a thriving, interconnected community look like? I'm only going to assume it'll look just how it looks right outside when I see my window, except this time when I see each other interact, it's like, hey neighbor, how you doing? Hey, how's everything going? How's your daughter? Blah, blah, blah. A more welcoming environment, I'll say it like that.
Yeah.
Again, these are a challenge to just think about, absorb, just kind of figure out, as you go from your in-home challenge to neighborhood challenge to community challenge. These things take time. But if you just start the game and don't always go back to home base and just explore just a little bit further each time, just a little bit, and just don't rush it, don't force the process. Just go just a little bit further each time you step outside your house. You'll realize that you are getting so much better at all of these things and building a community without even having to force or try that hard. Just from doing it a little step by step, 1% more each day.
Yeah.
And that leads to the step. How can you take the first one today? That is the communication game. Again, for the record, my name is Tariq Ali Cayne, co-founder and coaching director of Pitch Play Co. Thank you, Jason, Jim, Ivan, for being a part of my first time doing the communication game. I had fun making it, so this was fun to do it.
Yeah. Well, good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That was really good.
For the recording, hey, you guys, keep follow us, Pitch Play, follow us everywhere, and me, follow me.
Pitch Play
too.
Co.
And
Tariq Cayne, Pitch Play Co.
There we go.
Ivan, you want to introduce yourself real quick and where people can connect with you if they're interested?
Sure. Ivan Alfaro. I'm an affordable housing developer, and my website is commonwalk.com. I also do some episodes on a separate channel with Jason called From Pain to Gain, where we observe pain and reflect on it. And I'll hand it off to you, Jason.
Yeah, Jim, tell us who you are and how people can connect with you if they're interested.
Yeah, I'm a personal and professional development coach and community leader at untanglednarrative.com. And you can join up, work with me as one-on-one coaching, or just join the community and connect up with other people that are also working through where they're at, trying to get where they're going next.
Cool. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and I work with personal development type organizations to help them grow their influence and their income. Thank you so much, Tariq, for sharing the communication game with us. And like I said, his company is Pitch Play Co. You can check him out. He's online, pitchplayco.com, or find him on social media. So he's also been on several of the past episodes of the Share Life podcast, so go back and check them out. And yeah, any final words you want to give us, Tariq, as we wrap up here?
Just simply thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Jim, Jason, Ivan, just for your participation. It made it fun for me hearing a different thought, so I appreciate it. So yeah, just thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Tariq.